Good morning, everyone. My name is Gurmeet. I am migration agent for Business SA. I have Nancy, our manager, migration and trade with us, and we have Andre. Andre will help you if any of you would like to understand something in Mandarin, so he's here to translate it for you. We have three different segments. We'll discuss 485 visa, which is the visa which students generally opt for, and actually they don't have a choice if you ask me, because they don't have much time to apply for a visa. That's what they opt for once they graduate. We'll discuss something about work visas. You guys would have heard of students moving to, generally they say, we'll find a sponsor. So when they say we'll find a sponsor, what they mean is they'll try and get a work visa. So we'll discuss work visas, that is segment 2. We'll also discuss other skilled visas. So let me put there 4 segments. That is segment 3. And the last one is, for you being graduates from South Australian Public University, what are the benefits for you guys which state would give you? We call them state nomination advantages. So what I would suggest is, because they're all 4 separate segments, so once we finish, I would encourage you to ask questions about that, because you all will, and everybody will be on the same page at the segment. So better you ask the question related to that segment at that stage. We'll of course have time at the end of the session for your questions. Right? So the standard disclaimer, because being registered professionals, whatever we say, we are responsible for it. So whatever we're saying today is valid as of today. Rules change. Migration law changes more frequently than any other law in this country. So if tomorrow, and it's getting recorded of course, if tomorrow you're going to refer to it, please make sure you just don't refer to this thing alone, because things may have changed by then. So please make sure you refer to other websites. If required, take professional help. So what's Business SA? Business SA, half the times, maybe more than half the times, we get the impression that probably we are a government organization. No, we are not. We are a Chamber of Commerce and Industry for South Australian businesses. We are a not-for-profit organization, but not for free, because when I joined, I asked for a salary, and they have to pay me a salary. So it's not for free, but we do have, we try, because this is part of our CSR initiative, corporate social responsibility. We realize that, and Flinders being one of our members, we realize that students at times make avoidable mistakes. And after having spent so much of money studying here for 2 to 4 years, just one small error can put everything in jeopardy. And particularly if you want to stay back, you want some other visas, and if you commit small error, well, it can have serious repercussions. So that's the idea of this initiative. And we'll try and encourage you to ask as many questions as you want, as I said. We are 179 years old, very old. And in migration business, we've been there for 6 years. We also have translation services. Our migration business, of course, is a paid service, except for these CSR initiatives that we do. But our charges are, we don't charge like other professionals. Those are in the market because, as I said, we are a not-for-profit organization, right? We have translation services in 20 languages, more than 20 languages actually. So if you need help with translating documents, which most of the students would need, you can approach us. So we can provide you translation services as well. Well, people say 485 is a TR, temporary resident visa. Actually, it isn't. It's a temporary graduate visa. The idea for this visa is that people who study here, they should get valuable work experience in Australian work environment. That's the idea. And as students, when you come here as students, how many of you had to justify GTE, which is genuine temporary entrant? You write those statements of purpose. Why do you want to be here? And how happy you would be to go back into a country and utilize this education. So this is the next step. Okay, you studied here. Now we'll give you some valuable experience, but nobody's saying that you should try and be here for a permanent basis, right? So this is not a temporary resident visa. When we say temporary, it somehow indicates that you'll have an option of going to a permanent from it. No, it is only to give you experience. So what's the basic requirement for a 485 visa, a temporary graduate visa? Two basic requirements. The course you've done here should have been for 2 years. This course has to be full-time. It cannot be an online course. This course has to be studied as an accredited course, which is what we call, which comes under CRI course. There's a website we can go and check. So your university should have been, or your educational institution should have been authorized to give education to international students. So that kind of course, and 2 years of that. So if you're doing undergraduate and it's 3 years, so it should be okay for you. Even for postgraduates, for PhD, you can ask me any question you want. If you have a question, please do ask. Oh, okay. I was talking to you. You have a question? Okay. All right. So some of you would be studying a little bit too hard and finishing your course earlier than those 2 years. So even if you're doing it, it's fine as long as you spend 16 calendar months studying that course. 16 calendar months start from the day your classes start, not your date of orientation. Right, and it's possible some of you would have come through TAFE and are doing degree here. If they are both linked, you can claim both as, which would make you eligible under those 2 years. You can claim both the educations. Not all actually. So if it's ALICOS, I have some examples I'll show you later. But if it is like ALICOS, it's not considered as part of these 2 years because it is not leading to award of a diploma, a certificate, or a degree. If it's a bridging course for nursing students, yes, bridging course cannot be considered as part of these 2 years. Okay. One more thing. When do you apply for a 485? You apply for a 485 after you finish your studies, of course, and within 6 months of completion of your studies. When we say completion of studies, okay, so we'll come to that. Anybody who's doing an associate degree here? No? So that's fine. So if you're doing an associate degree, it is considered equivalent to a diploma, but for these 2 years, it is not considered as an appropriate qualification. That's one. Anytime you want to check how many years is your study for, you can go to this website, cricos.education.gov.au. Look out for your course under your university. It will have a number of weeks mentioned against it. If the number of weeks are 92 or above, then you're safe. Right? So there are some postgraduate courses which are for 1.5 years. Some universities provide them. So please have a look. Those courses would have 78 weeks. So if it is 78 weeks, then obviously you would not qualify for a 485 visa. How do we make sure? How do we prove that you've done 92 weeks of course and you finished it within the last 6 months? You take what we advise is take a letter from your university. A university would generally give you a letter mentioning that you completed your subjects you passed out on this particular date, and this was the date on which you got this score, your final score, which is called a transcript. The award of degree is not the date of your completion of studies because awards are generally given a few months after you finish your course, so that's not the date of completion. So please be careful. Generally most of the courses finish in December, either in December or in July in universities. So that would be an approximate date. Some universities have trimester systems, so there would be another parts of the periods of year as well, different months. So whenever you finish your studies, you have to apply within 6 months of that. So what we generally suggest is, please take a letter from your educational institution mentioning that on this particular date you completed your course. And you have to apply within 6 months of that date. Examples of valid combinations. So diploma to degree, they have to be in the same stream. You did a diploma in engineering, then you're doing a degree in engineering, they would be linked. You do a diploma in cookery, and now you're doing something in finance, they're not linked. So you have to make sure that both of them, your degree and diploma, both courses are linked. But if you're doing a degree, an undergraduate or postgraduate course, which is 2 years and above, you don't have to worry about these combinations. Two streams. The first one, because there's nobody who's a vet student here, would not apply here. The second stream is for anybody who's done a bachelor, master, or a PhD. A bachelor or a master by coursework gets a 485 for 2 years. A master by research student gets it for 3 years, and a PhD gets it for 4 years. So this visa for PhD students, there are 4 of you guys here, would be for 4 years.
How much for bachelor did you say?
2 years. 2 years. Yeah, 2 is the minimum. So the one above is for those who are doing certificate courses or diplomas. So we don't have that's called vocational educational courses. So nobody is doing a vocational course here. So it's minimum 2 years, 3 years, or 4 years. Processing time, 39 to 78 days. You would have generally 2 months to 2.5 months after your completion of studies. By the time your visa finishes, you just have about 2 months most of the time, unless your course is finishing in December, when you have time till March, sometime till 15th, some get visa till 31st of March. It also depends on the date till which you've taken your OSHC. So you would know your overseas overseas student health cover. So that is also linked to your visa. So in case you take an OSHC for a shorter period, your visa will also be granted for that shorter period. So the time you finish your course, you should be following up with your institution to give you that letter, because you don't have much time, and you should apply for a 485 as soon as possible. What is required at the time of application? So this is something which is very important, and these are some of the basic mistakes we find students making. You have to apply for your Australian Federal Police Check. It is called an NPC, National Police Check. You can go to Australian Federal Police website, and it's about $42 or so. What you need is you should have applied for it, and you should attach the proof of having applied for it with your 485 application, because it takes about a month at times. Sometimes you get it next day, and sometimes they take about a month to give you that police report. So you should just provide the proof of having applied for it. You don't have to wait for the report, right? Don't miss that, because if you miss that, your visa application is not valid. It will be refused, and if during that time your student visa has also expired, so you would be on a bridging visa, and if your application is refused on a bridging visa, you cannot apply again for a 485. You have to either apply for, there are very limited number of visas then you can apply. Most of the students then have to go back. So please make sure when you apply for a 485 application, it is complete in every respect. That is what I was talking about initially, people making avoidable mistakes, and all those years of hard work, I won't say is a waste, but yes, the plans would be put behind by a few years. They have to go back and plan again. Another thing is your OSHC is not valid for this visa, and you would know if you have to be in Australia on a temporary visa, you need to have health insurance. So you need another kind of health insurance. Bupa calls it essential visitor cover. Every insurance company has a brand name for it. If you go and tell them, that you need insurance for a 485, they would tell you which one, which product. You have two options. You can let your OSHC run till your student visa expires, and by that time, buy this. But at that time, then the case officer who's handling your case file would ask you to prove that you got your new insurance. So I would suggest when you're applying, get the new insurance. Easier, right? So if you paid premium, most of the insurance company would adjust your OSHC premium with this insurance. So it's easier. So rather than waiting till your OSHC is finished, try and get this insurance and make sure you have it when you're applying. Third is your English scores, IELTS or PTE academic. You have others as well. 6 overall and 5 in each minimum. Should be less than 3 years old at the time of application. It is unlike your OSHC, because in OSHC you have to have an insurance for 2 years, 3 years. This insurance is a monthly premium, and they say you have a cover and they'll debit a monthly premium from your account. So there's no period defined. So you don't have to buy, you don't have to pay a lot of money at the very beginning, right? Like in OSHC, it's very expensive, I know. And for, I don't know, any of you who are here with your partners, for partners, it's way too expensive. I checked yesterday, it was about $7,000 for 2 years. So I don't know how many of you have it, but if you have it, then you paid a lot of money. That's all I can say. In case your student visa has expired, it's unlikely, and it's not been 6 months. You have applied for another visa, you're on a bridging, but 6 months have not lapsed, you can still apply for a 485 as long as your student visa, your education qualification was within the last 6 months of application. So if you're a bridging visa A or B, you can apply. But if you have a 485 which has been declined on the bridging visa A or B, you cannot apply. In case, I mean, that's true of every visa application. If you're on a bridging and your visa, if you have a refusal of a visa application, there's a section called Section 48. It applies. You cannot, there are only very limited visas you can apply. Protection visas, partner visas, those kind of visas, not a 485. If you have applied for a 485 earlier, well, you cannot apply again. If you have applied for a 476 earlier, 476 is a different kind of visa. It is for graduates from specific universities, generally for engineering, people who have studied from institutions which come under Washington Accord. So those kind, that's a different visa altogether. But if you have had that visa earlier, then you're not eligible to apply for a 485. You sure?
What if, so I tried to apply for 485, but was not granted. So
you were not granted, there has to be a reason for that.
Yeah, I think it's either, I think because I got stuck on the Australia police check.
You did not apply for the police check before you applied for your visa.
Yeah. So I think because I did not complete the police check requirement.
You did not apply for it before you, or you did not submit it later?
I submitted it, but the police check result is way too late, and so I think I did not complete the.
Okay. Let me explain. If you applied for it at the time of application, and you provide a proof of having applied for it with your application, even if they take 6 months, the visa officer will have to wait. Even if they take 6 months to give you a police check report, the visa officer will have to wait. But if you do not submit it at the time of your application, then they can just straight away refuse your application.
In case of, if it was refused or I did not apply, then
Your question is, can you apply again?
Can I apply again?
Yes, because you were not a holder of a 485 earlier, you were only an applicant. So of course you can apply if you meet the other conditions, right? There's one more condition, which is if you have applied for a student visa, and the date is I think 5th of November 2011. So if any of you have applied for a student visa on or before 5th of November 2011, then you're not eligible to apply for these 2 to 4 year visas. Yes, you cannot just go to your country and apply. You have to stay here to apply, and you have to be here when it is granted. If you have a partner, a child who's onshore, and if that person is a member who's applied with you, So they have to be on shore at the time of grant as well. Few things which I would tell you, I'll go back to the last slide because we're finishing 485. Few things which I would tell you need to be careful about. Generally, when you finish your studies, you feel like going home and spending 3 weeks with the family, then coming back and applying for a 485. I would suggest please don't do that because your education is finished, your student visa would be about to finish in 2 months' time. And if you go and come back, there's a software called Prism, which universities and educational institutions use, which the department has access to. And at the airport, they'll check and they would find out that you finished your education, you just have 3 more weeks of your student visa and you're coming back. And they will stop you and they may ask you questions. So you have to justify why you're coming back because you finished your education and you went back. So why are you coming back 2 weeks before you finish? If you would have applied for a 485 before leaving, then obviously you would have a bridging visa. They would have no reason to question you. So it's always better to apply for a 485, have a bridging visa, which will come into effect once your student visa finishes, and then leave. Always better. So on 485, would there be some questions before I go to the next slide? Sure.
I have 2 questions actually. When we get the bridging visa after we do the application, what are we allowed to do then, or what are we not allowed to do then? Like, do the same work rights and the work hours and all of that apply?
Okay. Right, good question. Okay, so as you have the same work rights which you had of your previous visa. So if you get a bridging visa and you are on a student visa, so you would have the same work rights as you would have on a student visa. Students are allowed to work 40 hours in a fortnight during the currency of their studies, and when they're not studying, during the breaks, they can work full-time. PhD students can work full-time all the time, so there's no restriction on PhD students. The same restrictions would apply. Yes, and if you're on a bridging visa, please don't leave Australia because bridging visa A does not allow you to enter. It only gives you authority to stay. So if you're leaving, you have to apply for another bridging visa before you leave. It is called bridging visa B. So it's possible there would be an emergency, you may have to rush. But before leaving, please make sure you either apply, better you get a grant. It takes about 2 days maximum. At times you can get it in a day. It's better you get your BVB granted and then leave, right? So don't leave Australia on a bridging visa A without having, because that won't give you right. You cannot come back on a bridging visa A. The second question.
Is the time from December to March, is that enough time for the 485 to be granted? Like, how much time does it usually take?
It was there in one of the slides, 39 to 78 days. That's the processing time. And these keep on changing.
For both streams?
It was for the graduates, for your stream, let me put it this way. So it's 39 to 78 days, but it keeps on changing, but it doesn't really matter. What matters is, have you applied for it before your student visa finished? So if you apply for it before it finishes, your bridging visa becomes active till they grant it to you. Right?
Thank you.
So do you apply for the bridging visa separately, or it comes with the 485?
Okay, good question. So when you apply for 485, bridging visa A comes with it. That's automatic. Bridging visa B is something that you have to apply for. On A, you have the same work rights, but you cannot enter. You cannot leave Australia and enter. You can leave, they won't stop you at the border, but they will not let you come back. So bridging visa B is something which you have to apply for. There's a fee for bridging visa B. Bridging visa A is part of your main visa application. So, but 485 is not a cheap visa. It's $1,500, the application fee. And if you have a partner, another $750. There's a child, $375. And if there's a subsequent partner, if you want to add somebody later on, that person has to pay $1,500 again. So it's not a visa which is for students, I guess. I won't call it cheap visa. Right. Any other questions? So you're all, yeah, sure.
What is the probability of getting the visa?
Probability of getting a 485 visa, if you meet all the conditions, I will say 99.9999%. There's nothing which is absolute in the world. So if you meet all the conditions, we would have an offer for you at the end of this. I'll share it once we finish it. Maybe you can use that and you can be a little more sure about it. Right?
Yeah. The spouse also has to apply the national police check as well.
Additional police check.
I mean, the national police check, we have to apply for the full five visa. You told them before, right?
485, yes, you have to apply for an Australian federal police check.
Oh, yeah, that one also should be for the spouse.
Before filing, of course.
I mean,
For the spouse.
For the spouse, yes. Yes, if I missed it, my mistake, yes. Any adult applicant, yes. That's important question. Yes, good question. Yes, it is very important. And insurance should also cover the spouse, of course. Sure.
So this 485 visa, is this only student that got their student visa after November 2011 that is eligible to apply this visa? What if the student got their student visa before that? Any chance?
You should not have applied for a student visa on or before 5th of, your first student visa on or before 5th November 2011. If you have, then you may still have option of the other stream, which is for 18 months. There were two streams for wet students. For some, if you have applied for a first student visa on or before November 2011, I think 5th of November, if I remember the date right, then you have the option for, let me show you that slide again. Yeah, the first one, the first stream, you can still try for that. There's a different eligibility for it. Eligibility would cover whether your skill is under, there's a skill list called MLTSSL. This is medium and long-term strategic skills list. So if the skill is under that, there has to be an assessment we should have applied for. Again, not granted, but you should have applied for at that stage. And yes, two main conditions besides the other one, insurance and AFP, of course.
For the police check, you said that we have to apply for the police check, at least have done the process before we apply for this for 85, right? So the police check, how long is actually valid?
Police check is valid for 12 months. Yes. So your question is that can you apply it right away and not apply it at that time? So you can.
If you can apply it a little bit earlier.
Yes, you can. You can. You can try. You can of course do your IELTS test because that's valid for 3 years. You can do that. So these are few things which you can take care of before you finish your studies, of course. So we had a few more questions. Yeah, sure.
For the police check, what if the spouse is offshore?
Okay, so why would a student be offshore? I am just wondering that.
The spouse offshore.
Is your spouse, or does the spouse have the student visa?
No.
Okay, so would you be adding your spouse later on, subsequent entrant? Okay, no, not required because if you've been here only then it's required. But if he's spent time here, then it will be required. Sure.
Can you apply for F1 and PR at the same time?
Apply for a 485 and PR. You can apply for as many number of visas as you want, and if you have those deep pockets for the fees, I'll tell you what happens. Any subsequent visa granted nullifies your previous visa. Most of them would do that. So if you have a student visa and you apply for a visitor visa, your student visa becomes invalid, right? So you have to be careful. And what exactly do you want to do when you're applying for multiple visas? right? Sure.
My question will be, like, if you already got a 485 visa and for some reason you want to go back to school for study, so do you need to apply for another student visa, or you just can use your 485 visa for training or for study for?
Okay, for how long do you want to study?
Just a question. Maybe perhaps it's, how about, let's say, less than 6 months?
You can study on a 485. Nobody would stop you. Yes, or you can always apply for another student visa. But then after that, you will not be eligible for 485 because you would not have those. I don't know what grant we'll have. 6 months would not be a degree, so you would not be eligible for another 485. Anyway, you can't apply for another 485. So you can study during 6 months. You should be studying under 485. So what are these sponsored visas, as we call them? They were students who would finish their studies and would look for a sponsor. And sponsor would nominate them for, there used to be a visa called 457. I don't know how many of you heard about it. 457 is now called 482. Not many changes, but there are a lot of changes if you were a student. The changes are, earlier you could get a 457 without any work experience. You could apply for it. I mean, it would depend on the case officer whether they found you eligible or not. But now they say if you don't have 2 years of work experience, you cannot be nominated for a 482 visa.
Sorry, suddenly I remember about the IELTS requirement.
Yes.
So that band about 5 and 6 thing,
Mm-hmm.
does it matter if it's academic IELTS?
No, it doesn't matter. Could be any. PTE is only academic. PTE, there's no general. PTE is only academic. So they don't have a PTE general as such. IELTS has academic and general streams, so it could be any of those two. And if you, yeah, any of those two. And if you are, it's not mentioned there, if you are from New Zealand, if you are a citizen of New Zealand, UK, USA, Ireland, and Canada, then you don't have to have an IELTS score, right? So you would know that because you would have not required an IELTS score when you came here as a student either. So students from these 5 countries, who are citizens of these 5 countries, who have a passport issued by these 5 countries, don't need IELTS score at any stage, right? There are 2 more visas, 186, 187. 186 is a permanent resident visa. I've known students who have, after finishing their studies, applied for, these are all employer nominated. So you have to find a sponsor. Somebody as an employer has to sponsor you, should say that I can't find these skills in Australia. I think this person is the one who can do this job, and this is my job profile, this is this person's educational skills, they match, and I would sponsor him either for a PR or a 482, which is a 2 to 4 year work visa now. Earlier it used to be 4 years, up to 4 years. So now what they're saying is, if you want to come, if as a student you want to apply for these kind of PR visas, you need 3 years of work experience. Very difficult for a student to have 2 or 3 years of work experience. But important point is, this work experience does not have to be post your qualification. So if someone has had work experience before coming here and studied in the same skill here, those skills match and can find a sponsor, they can still try, right? Another thing which you can do is, after finishing your studies, and when you're applying for 485, that's 2 years, but you can just juggle a bit with your time and complete those 2 years under 485 and would have time to apply for a 482 as well. Nursing students would find a lot of employers who would like to nominate them because nurses are in shortage. How would you do that under 485? So your studies finish in December, you have visa till March, you apply for a 485 in February, you get a grant in April or May, and if you get a job in January, Then you have 2 years, and those you can finish by the January 2 years after that, and you would have visa till April or May. So you would have 3, 4, 5 months to apply for a 482. If you have a nominating employer, you would still have time, and you would have the work experience as well. 3 years would be tough unless you have previous work experience before you came here.
Should be like full-time work?
Yes, when we say work experience for 482, it has to be a full-time work experience. Different definitions for different visas. For 482, they say a usual full-time, which is 35 to 38 hours per week.
35 hours per week.
35
full-time.
full-time, I'm talking in number of hours, 35 hours to 38 hours per week. So that's required for a 482 or a 186 or 187. For other visa applications, it's generally 20 hours, but for this, they made it even more difficult. They say 35 to 38 hours. For those who are doing PhD, your internship, medical internship, industry placement, master by research, PhD, you can count it as your work experience. The last point, this is something which changed on 18th of March this year. 482 now has temporary visas where you cannot progress to a permanent resident visa. For that visa, what they're saying is, you should meet the same genuine temporary entrant criteria which probably you would have had to meet when you came here on a student visa. So what they would like to know is, will you go back or not? And what they say is, if you've been here for more than 4 years on any visa, then they would like to look at it closely, whether you're meeting the genuine temporary entrant criteria or not. So as a student, you would have probably spent 4 years. Student visa and 485, it will stack up to 4 years. So, but we yet to see how they actually apply it, because this changed on 18th of March. And this is in policy, not in regulations. Policy is subject to interpretation by a case officer. So we'll see how they interpret this particular definition in future. But for students, I mean, there's another statement in the policy which says, if it's a student, so it shouldn't be taken as a negative point that the student has spent 4 years. So two contradictory statements in policy, we do not know as yet how would they interpret later. So have you heard of these numbers? 189, 190, 489. Actually, all visas are known by the number. 457 became notorious. So that's why they changed it to 482, although they changed all the rules by the end of this year, by March this year. And now they have just changed a number, and they don't want to call it by a number now. They say it's a TSS. So that's how the bureaucrats think. They think that if you just have a name, not a number, it'll not have bad vibes around it. So all these are visa numbers. 189 is independent, skilled visa. 190 is a state nominated visa. 489 is a provisional visa, which is again state nominated. This is what you would be looking at after you spend 2 years here on a 485. And we'll explain how you become eligible. You need 60 points. So we'll explain how you get those 60 points later, but this is just the basic. Right? So that's how you get your points. PhD would get 20 points. Everybody else here would get 15 points because there's no diploma holder here. So people who are finishing PhD will get 20 points. 15 to 30 points. That's not the age. This is the point. No, these are points for different age brackets. If you're below 25, you get 25 points. 25 to 33, that's where most of you would be there. You get 30 points. And 33 to 40, you get 25 points again. And 40 to 45, you get 15 points. And now people above 45 are no more eligible. You guys who are studying here get 5 points for both point number 3 and 4. You being studying here in a regional Australia, English, if you get 7 bands in each, or 65 in each module. When you say each, in all 4 modules, which is listening, speaking, writing, reading, 65 in each, you get 10 points. If you get 8 bands, you get 20 points. PT equivalent of 8 bands is 79. So 79 in each. So you get points for your English proficiency. Some of you engineers can do a professional year during 485. If you do a professional year, you get 5 points for that. Right? Engineers, accountants, they can do professional years. Work experience, onshore work experience. If you have 1 year work experience, you get 5 points. Onshore, 3-year work experience, you get 10 points. You can also add your work experience, which was offshore. Offshore is different. 3-year work experience, you get 5 points. 5-year work experience, you get 10 points. 8 years of work experience, you get 15 points. But this work experience should be in the last 10 years. Right? So this is the chart, and you should be looking at it once you're ready for those visas. For a 190, which is a state-nominated visa, the state would award you 5 points. For a 489, which is again a state-nominated provisional visa, 489 is not a permanent resident visa, but it's a provisional visa, you get 10 points. If you have done special community language qualifications, which are NATI approved, which are at professional level, either as an interpreter or a translator, you get 5 points for that. If you're married and your partner has skills which are required in demand, and those skills are assessed, you get 5 more points for partner skills. South Australia, Tasmania, Northern Territory, all of them are regional. In other states, they have given postcodes. But then regional has to be, okay, that's an interesting question. How do you prove, although you can always prove that you have studied at a regional center because the campus is regional, but at that stage, you also have to prove that you lived at a regional center. For Adelaide, it sounds like a silly question. You can't live in Brisbane and study in Adelaide, but you need to provide a proof of having lived in Adelaide for 2 years at that stage. Generally, people don't have that proof. They give stat declarations. For South Australia, they're acceptable. You give a stat declaration, or if you stayed with somebody else, a relative, a friend, they give a stat declaration, this person stayed with me in my house, that is acceptable. But if you have to really know what are the proofs required, you can show your bank account statements for 2 years, which have your address. You can show your utility bills, your mobile bills, which would have your address for those 2 years. So while you're studying, please gather those as well, right? So it's difficult at times, 3 years, 4 years after you finish your studies, and then start looking for those proofs. Okay, when we say post-qualification, I'll give you an example. Somebody who's an engineer and doing masters here, was an engineer in, which place are you from? Bangladesh. So he did his bachelor's of engineering in Bangladesh, and after that he has few years of experience of engineering in Bangladesh. And for this visa, he says, my qualification, base qualification is my bachelor's in Bangladesh, then that experience will be counted. Because that skill is also, that education is also eligible for the step which we call assessment. Experience is required by assessment agency. Experience is required by the state which is nominating you. Experience is required by the visa officer who will approve your visa, right? English, again, is required at all 3 stages. Everybody would have the different rules, unfortunately. Or South Australia, we come to that, if you're taking South Australian nomination, they say 20 hours, right? 20 hours a week, that is sufficient. Some assessment agencies are okay with 20, some are not. State, when you're applying for state, it has to be a full-time. Full-time has to be in your skill, so it could be 35 hours, it could be 30 hours, it could be 38 hours. This has got nothing to do with 485. You can apply these visas from any part of the world. So even if you're offshore, you can apply for these visas, but partners should have the skills. I'll give an example. Say there is somebody who's a nurse from Australia and she's applying. Her partner is, again, let's say an engineer. So engineering skills are in demand and he gets his skills assessed. The assessment comes out as positive. So the nursing skills, she adds her points and 5 points of her partner, they get added. They could be anywhere. Actually, there's a limit to which you can add a point. Somebody would have been a postgraduate, a graduate, a PhD, so you can only add up to 20 points, not beyond that. If you are a graduate, right, and you're claiming 15 points for your education, then you get 5 points for your credentialed language skills, additional 5 points. But if you're saying for that, would it be a diploma? I'm not sure. But with graduation, you cannot add your diploma. You already got 15 points there. 190 is permanent resident. You're from day one a permanent resident of Australia, not South Australia. But if South Australia is the one which is sponsoring you, you're supposed to spend first 2 years in South Australia. 489 is different. 489 is a provisional visa. It's for 4 years. And within those 4 years, you have to spend 2 years in the state which is nominating you. And you have to work for 1 year during those 2 years, about 35 hours a week. And then after staying here for 2 years and working here for 1 year, within those 2 years, you apply for another visa, which is called 887, which is a permanent resident visa. There's another visa which you have to apply for. 190 is actually a kind of an obligation right now because you give a declaration to the state in writing when you're getting this nomination that I'll stay here for 2 years, but that condition is not mentioned on your visa grant, right? In case of 489, there's a condition that you have to spend 2 years in regional Australia. It also doesn't mention that you stay in South Australia, by the way. It says regional Australia. It could be regional New South Wales also. You have to stay there for 2 years and work there for 1 year, and you have to apply for another visa. So you have to apply for another permanent resident visa after staying in regional Australia for 2 years. If you don't have sufficient points, you can go for 489, but 489 is state nominated. Does the state need accountants? We have to look at that as well. So every state has its own list, by the way. These are MLTS, they're different lists. We'll talk of those as well, right? So on these points, we'll discuss. If you want to, I know where this discussion is heading, but I'll be answering and we'll be discussing this in the slides later on. So you finished your education, you're looking at points. Before the points, we'll see what is your skill and under which list would your skill fall. Besides these lists, and every state has its own list. Those lists are subsets of these lists. They cannot be, they can't add a skill which is not mentioned in these lists. But every state has its own list where they say for these skills, we'll nominate. So every state has its own list. Like Western Australia only says that for 489, 190, we'll only nominate people who are mainly medical professionals or nurses. So Western Australia has a very limited list. South Australia has a very long list. It's probably the only state which I think this is the one state which encourages a lot of state-nominated visas. Besides Northern Territory, Tasmania, the biggest states, which are Victoria, New South Wales, they are more interested in business investor visas because business investors get them a lot of money. And states like South Australia, they're losing people. They're losing people in terms of internal migration as well. People who are South Australians are moving to other states, so they need to ramp up their population. So they are encouraging skilled migrations. So MLT SSL is the main list, as I would like to call it a federal list. Anybody whose skill falls in MLT SSL would be eligible for a 189 visa if they have the points. 189 is you can go and live in any state. You're free to go and settle in any part of Australia. MLT SSL, the cutoff for 189 visas, although we say you need 60 points to be eligible, but that's only to be eligible. This year, the cutoffs have been 70 or above. There's no point for state because this is your independent skilled visa, so no state is nominating you. If you have 70 points or above, you're a doctor is in an MLT SSL, you can straight away apply for a 189. So then we see how many points for age, work experience, English, all that thing. Studying in Australia, studying in regional Australia, we add everything up. If they are 70, then you can straight away apply for 189. If you don't have 70, then we look at short-term skilled occupation list. Short-term skilled occupation list is something which is only available for 190 and 189 visas, which are state nominated. Actually, 489 and 190 visas. 489 can also be your relative. Relative could even be a cousin, can also nominate you for a 489 besides the state. That's a separate stream altogether, but that has to be under MLT-SSL. There's another catch to it. So I'm not going there right now. So if you have such a case, we'll discuss it separately. So we look at which list. There's a new list which came up on 18th of March. It is called Regional Occupation List. It's mainly for 482 visas, but South Australia has adopted it and they put it in their own list. So Regional Occupation List is a new list. Besides these are generic lists. So under these lists, there are lists for every state, as I told you. Every visa has its own list. So if you're applying for a 190, there's an instrument which says these are the lists eligible for 189, these are eligible for 190, 489. They're different lists, but they would all be subsets of these lists. So once we find out that your skill falls under a particular list, you are eligible, you have sufficient points, we have to get your skill assessed. So unfortunately, even if you studied in Australia, you have to still get your skill assessed. Well, I don't have an answer for that. Why do they want it? Because assessment can be expensive. Doctor's registration is pretty expensive. Nurse's registration can be pretty expensive, but yes, you have to be registered. For somebody who's done engineering here, they have to go to Engineers Australia to get assessed. Engineers Australia charges $1,085 for assessment. For overseas, for somebody who studied from here, a little less, but not that less, around 800. I don't remember, but less than 1,085. But you have to be assessed. So how do you get assessed? You can get your assessment for your education and your work experience both. For education, you have to provide your transcripts, your degrees, your awards. For your work experience, you have to provide employer's reference, proof of employment, proof of paid employment, salary slips, accounts where salary was credited, tax returns, could be anything. If you're in Australia, PAYG, it could be your tax return. So you have to provide all that proof. So your assessment agency will assess you and would say that yes, this person, it will assess you on both parameters, would say, well, yes, the education is assessed as meets the criteria, and work experience they may say meet the criteria or may not meet the criteria. In some cases, they deduct some years of work experience. If you are an IT graduate from overseas, they'll deduct minimum 2 years of work experience. If you don't have 2 years of work experience, you will not be assessed at all. But if you're an IT graduate from Australia, I think one of you is here studying IT, so you don't have to worry about the 2 years work experience.
I have one question. If we apply for 489, so after 2 years, we will apply for PR.
Yes, there's another visa called 887.
887. There is also age limit is 45?
No. No age limit. At 489, there's an age limit, which is 45. After that, there's no age limit. There's no English requirement, just the work experience and proof of stay. But your other accompanying major applicants, say spouse or kids who are 18 or above, probably at that time, let's say, I don't know, but I'm just presuming. So if they have to have English skill of functional, minimum functional, which is 4.5 bands overall, or they can provide proof of having done graduation for 3 years in English medium. They can provide a certificate from a university college where they studied, so that would do. Or a 4.5 band, 4.5 band.
About that age, so after 2 years, no need the age?
No, there's no age limit, right? And this age limit is at the time of nomination. So at step 3, so once, let's say you have done your skill assessment, it's positive, you got the points, so what do you do next? Australia will not say, they'll not look for you, they're not searching for you. You have to go and tell them, I'm available. So you lodge an expression of interest, right? Expression of interest is lodged through the department's website. It's homeaffairs.gov.au. There's a lot of information on visas also on that website. You can go and check if you want. So you go, there's an application called Skills Select. You go through that, create a user ID password, lodge an expression of interest. In expression of interest, they would ask you all those questions. Your age, this much, work experience, this much, qualifications, this, and it will keep on adding your points. It will not ask you for any proof. It doesn't ask you for any proof. So you may claim whatever points you want to claim, right? But the problem is, if on the basis of that claim, you get an invitation, you have to prove that whatever you claimed, you have the documents for that. If you do not, then you have to pay for a visa application, your visa gets refused, declined. So it's very important, although it allows you to put in whatever you want, but it's not something which you should do. You should be very clear on which parameter you can claim points and only claim for those parameters, right? At this stage, when you're lodging expression of interest, you can also ask for state nomination because it asks you which visa are you choosing, 190, 489, 189. You can tick all three, right? And if you ticked 190 and 489, it'll ask you which state would you prefer. So you can give the state's name. It's better you give the state's name. If you don't mention the state's name, then there's a problem because state may not pick you. So if South Australia, you mention South Australia. So once that is done, South Australia would not know that you applied for an expression of interest and you mentioned South Australia there. You have to apply to South Australia for nominating you. There's a separate application. So you have to be, when I said you have to be registered in Australia, and that's your skill assessment, right? So your registration overseas would not work here. So you apply to the state, you go to the State nomination. These are general requirements of the state. These are not for South Australian graduates. We'll talk about it later, which would be a South Australian graduate. We're running late. Okay. So how much time do we have? 2 minutes? 20 minutes. Okay. Okay. I'll try and finish it in 20 minutes. So if you want a state nomination, these are the basic criteria. It's not for students. These are general criteria. I'll come back to these later. So there's a criteria for work experience. There's a criteria for English language proficiency. State has its own language requirement. For visa, you generally need 6 bands in each. But for state, for some skills, they say 7 in each, or 7.5 overall. So state has its own requirement. You can look at state's list on state's website. It's called SNOL, State Nomination Occupation List, right? And there's another list. There are 2 lists actually. And there's a financial capacity requirement. So there's a supplementary skill list and a state nominated occupation list. Supplementary skill list, I'll come to that. That's available only for few people who meet special conditions. So who's a South Australian graduate? Not everyone who studied here is a South Australian graduate. If you studied in different places, you should have spent at least 46 weeks here. 50% of that time should have been here. If you move out of South Australia after finishing your studies, you will not get the South Australian graduate advantage for state nomination. So if you're planning to move to Brisbane, to other states, after you finish your studies, you'll lose this advantage. So what are your advantages if you are a South Australian graduate? One is you get access to both the lists. Because supplementary skill list is very restricted. You need to meet 4 special conditions. One of these is high points. You need to have 70 points of your own. Right now, it has been increased to 80 because generally what happens is during July, they come out with planning levels. During the year, the points keep on increasing. Right now, what they want is 80 of your own. But in July, by July, if you have 70 of your own, you can be eligible for supplementary skill list. Second is if you have a sibling, which is brother, sister, blood relative, you can be eligible for supplementary skill list. It's called chain migration. Third is if you've worked here for 1 year, you can be eligible. Fourth is if you're a South Australian graduate, that's where we are, you're eligible for supplementary skill list, right? Others are not eligible. Other offshore clients, they cannot apply under supplementary skill list. They can only apply under state nominated list. Besides this, you have waivers in English, work experience, so these things. You would have waivers in English, work experience, and financial capacity as South Australian graduates. So we'll discuss what are the waivers. So if you want to be given access to supplementary skill list or special condition list, you have to, as a student, you have to meet additional conditions, all right? Bachelor or higher degree and working here in SA, then you are eligible for this supplementary skill list. If you're residing offshore and you're a South Australian graduate, if you go out, you can still avail this benefit. What I'm mentioning here, as a South Australian graduate, do you have access to the additional skills under this list or not? Right? So this is about additional skill list. You know, this is what South Australian website is. It's very convoluted. If you go to the website, it's very confusing. I'll try to simplify it, but I know it's still very confusing. So we're going step by step. Here, we're talking of only the waivers for this particular, access to this particular list, right? We'll talk about work waivers in a separate slide. Next one. So if you want work experience exemption, you have to be either a high-performing graduate. I'll tell you what a high-performing graduate is. So PhD, masters are all high-performing graduates, or you have a GPA of 6 or above. I think Flinders doesn't give GPAs, right? You do? I've had a few students from Flinders who were not sure what the GPA was. They said they don't get, I don't know why they said that. Okay, all right. So GPA of 6 and above, then you are a high-performing student, first-class honors, high-performing student. Don't have a GPA in bachelor's, But if you continue studying and if you have a GPA 6 in masters, okay, so for both lists, for high-performing students, you have work experience waiver. South Australia has a 1 year in the last year work experience requirement, so you get a waiver. If you are not a high-performing student, but you still have these English scores, if not English scores, if you are from one of those 5 countries, or if you're working in South Australia currently in your own skill, then you get a waiver for 1 year. You don't have to provide 1 year work experience proof. Even if you joined yesterday and today you want to apply for South Australian state nomination in your own skill, you are eligible, right? Just one point though, if you studied IT in your own country and you studied marketing here, you can ask for state nomination only for your marketing skill, not for your skill which you studied overseas. So this South Australian nomination for South Australian graduates is only for the skill and education which you've done here, not overseas. So English language exemption, again, available to high-performing students. For health and educational professionals, by the way, there are higher English language requirements. So you need to be registered. If you're registered, you've met those English language requirements. That should be fine. Otherwise, for doctors and nurses, it's 7 in each in academic. And for teachers, it's 7 in reading and writing, and 8 in speaking and listening. That's again IELTS academic. Yeah. You apply for these when you're applying for permanent resident 189, 190, or 489 visa. For 189, you would not need state nomination, but for 190 or 489, which are after 485, you need state nomination, right? And at that stage, if you want state nomination, you want those 5 or 10 points. And if you're a South Australian graduate, there are advantages of being a South Australian graduate. So these are the advantages I'm mentioning right now. Okay, and financial capacity conditions. You need to provide funds, 5,000 to 25,000 if you're onshore, 5,000 to 10 if you're single, 10 to 15 if you have a spouse with you, 15 to 20 if you have 1 child along with spouse, 20 to 25 you have 2 children along with your spouse. So those funds, if you are not a South Australian graduate, then you have to show those funds of your own. But if you're a South Australian graduate, you can ask your parents or even parents-in-law to provide the declaration that they have those funds and they'll fund you for that. So there's a declaration required by those. Okay. What is exemption? So if for visa you need 6 bands, that's not exempted, right? For your assessment, if you are nursing, then you need 7 in each, that's not exempted. But if say you are an accountant, then South Australia wants all accountants to have 7 bands in each, right? If you're an IT guy, they would say 7 bands in each or 7.5 overall. That's a state English requirement. But if you are a South Australian graduate, you get waiver for that English requirement. So you need English at 3 stages actually. State at assessment level, state nomination level, at visa level. And all may have different English language requirements. So this waiver is for state level requirement. Right, so business essay, we are into migration services. I mentioned initially that we'll offer you something at the end of this. Okay, so we have a small offer for everyone. When you're applying for a 485 and you want us to go through your documents and you want to say whether your documents are sufficient, whether you can, whether you are eligible, whether everything is in order, we would provide that to you, that specific advice to you for free. Obviously, we don't provide everything else for free, but we do have a 6-year-long history in migration services. We have a brand called Business Essay, which is known to have its own, credibility in the market. And we've seen that if I were to work individually in my own code, and if I were to work with Business Essay as my employer, the response obviously would be different because with my name, there's a credibility of the organization behind it. So, and our charges, our migration services and migration fees are pretty reasonable. For our members, we have discounts beyond our standard charges. And for students, we obviously can look at those things. But for 485, if you want us to have a look at your eligibility, we can tell you yes or no straight away. That will provide for free. Beyond that, you want to contact us. You want anybody else who wants to contact us. This is our email ID, but we'd encourage you to, if you are not sure, if you're not clear, take professional help. Mine, anybody's. I'm not saying ours only, but please take professional help. You spent so many years, your parents' money, your own hard work, and studying here. So and you have advantages of being South Australian graduates. So you would have preferences at different stages. You would have seen South Australia is willing to nominate you, state is willing to nominate you. So make sure everything is in order when you apply, right? Any questions? We can always fix a meeting. You can send an email. We can have formal meetings in office if you want. Our office is on Green Hill Road, at the corner of Onley Road. So very convenient. You can visit us, have an appointment if you want. So more than happy to help you guys, right? So if there are no more questions, then thank you so much for your time and your patience. Thank you.